You're listening to Your Magical Midlife. This podcast is for women who are seekers, dreamers, and unconventional thinkers. If you're a Gen X woman who's always walked your own path, but now feel like you've lost your way, listen up. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and coach, and I'm here to guide you back to yourself and to help you reconnect with your joy, your passion, and your purpose. Midlife knocked me sideways. I was not prepared for all the challenges that piled up one by one. Everything in my life felt like it was imploding, including my health and my sense of self. By the time I hit 50, I was completely lost. But here's the good part. I'm finding my way, and so can you. I'll be dropping episodes every Thursday on everything from ambivalent aging, to body changes, to relationship shifts, to career challenges, financial fears, crazy family dynamics, and spiritual awakenings. Some weeks I'll be musing, some weeks I'll be ranting, and sometimes I'll have amazing guests who will share their expertise with you. Midlife brings a lot of change and a lot of challenges, but there's also so much magic to be uncovered. Let's dive in. Carin Luna-Ostaseski made history as the first American woman and first Hispanic person to create a Scotch whiskey brand called Sia Scotch Whiskey. It was award-winning, and she made all her money through a record-breaking Kickstarter campaign. It was an award-winning blend that was funded entirely through a record-breaking Kickstarter campaign. She also founded the Entrepreneurial Spirit Fund, which has provided over $350,000 in grants to underserved entrepreneurs. In November 2024, she pivoted and launched Hot or Just Me, an online shop for managing perimenopause and menopause symptoms. Hot or Just Me offers trusted products, expert advice, and community support, and it was inspired by her own experiences with perimenopause. Carin's mission is to empower women to navigate these life transitions with ease and confidence.
Hi, Kate.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. It's so nice to meet you.
Likewise. So much of what you talk about has really resonated with me in terms of just like taking an intentional pause. But yeah, it's when you talked about this extended adolescence, it was just something that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
I've never heard it phrased that way before.
Yeah, I feel like it's a generational thing, and I feel like it's become more and more pronounced over time.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like our mothers, our grandmothers, the generation before that, they were adults by the time that they were 18.
Yeah.
21, the very most.
Yeah.
I feel like I wasn't an adult until I was in perimenopause.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel you. And it's like, it's so true what you said. Like my parents were immigrants. They came over, so they had to like grow up real fast, right? Like learn the language, like figure out, how to work and make money and make sacrifices just to survive. And yeah, we've been given, just a little bit of the luxury of space, right? To just kind of figure out what we want to do with our lives versus what we have to do.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting perspective and point that I want to just expand on for a second, because that's so true. We were given the privilege of taking our time to grow up because we didn't have as much responsibility as we think we may have had.
Yeah.
I didn't have the responsibilities my mother had. I certainly didn't have the responsibilities my grandmother had, and probably my grandmother's mother and her women behind her.
Mm-hmm.
I got to go to school and all the way through college, and I wasn't expected to get married immediately and then start a family, and so I did none of those things. But
it's also like generationally too, right? Like, in the 50s and 60s, it was just the one income earner, right? And then the wife was just expected to just, sit on her on her hands and do nothing except raise kids. And so, now it's like, we have the flexibility to choose if we want children, if we want to be married. If we're not reliant on this, male income coming in, right?
Yeah, that's true. So tell me, about your journey as an entrepreneur, because it looks like you have a very successful and long one.
Yeah. Thank you. I call this my act three. Really, like I'm 47. I've had a couple of journeys already. My first one, when I was living in New York, I was a graphic designer and creative director. So I worked for major media companies and then moved out to California where I live now and worked for a lot of Silicon Valley tech startups. And I was just really disenchanted with it by, year 17, where I was just staring at a computer screen all day so that other people could stare at their screens and, designing things with the pure intention of keeping them on their screens longer. And I just thought, that's not what I want my legacy to be. Like, what I want to leave behind in this world is more about connection in real life with people and having these shared moments. And, I was having those moments with people over a glass of whiskey. So I decided to start a Scotch whiskey brand, and it's called Sia. And I was the first woman in history to ever create a brand of Scotch. So definitely broke a lot of barriers in terms of being a woman and a Hispanic woman at that in the Scotch industry. Really shone a light on minority entrepreneurs and set up a grant program to help give back. To date, we've given over $350,000 in grants to help small businesses. And then that brand was acquired, and I was in my 40s and starting to just really feel like, that's not it for me. I have a lot of horsepower left, a lot of gas in the tank. And I was starting to feel a lot of these symptoms like hot flashes and night sweats and weird periods and insomnia and brain fog, a lot of anxiety. So just a lot of things started creeping up that weren't there before. So I got really curious and said, well, what's out there for me? And I couldn't really find a resource that kind of had everything: products, services, directories, information. So I decided to create Hot or Just Me. And so I named it because that's a question that I was constantly asking myself, like, is it hot or is it just me? And doctors weren't really helpful. I wasn't quite a candidate for HRT. A lot of doctors in the US, I think only 3% are actually trained in menopause. And for the most part, they get only about 3 or 4 hours of certification through their residency. So, the doctors I had were quick to advise me to take Xanax or SSRIs. And it just felt like, hey, let's just take a step back and really think about what's happening. So that's how I got here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is, well, except for the part about like going from media to
alcohol. Yeah.
And then managing to grow it enough to sell it and then hitting like a wall. I think the hitting the wall is where no matter what you were doing before, every woman gets to.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember around the time I turned 40, my anxiety, I was never like not an anxious person. I'll say that. I've always been a very high strung person. But when I was getting around my 40th birthday, it just, like, the volume went up. Anxiety went from like a 6 to an 11.
Wow.
And it was unbearable. And no one said to me, maybe it's hormonal.
Yeah. I mean, if we had that knowledge, like, what could we unlock, right? I was definitely like having a panic attack on an airplane at one point, going, what is happening? This is not normal. This is not me. And started to realize as I kind of stepped back, like, oh, I was overcaffeinated. I was dehydrated. I was watching a show that had a lot of strobe lights. All of these things, like perfect storm that I kind of, with the hormone imbalance, started triggering a panic attack. And I thought I was having a heart attack. It was so scary. And then, come to find, like, okay, I'm not, dealing with any heart issues right now. But, what tools can I surround myself with to kind of regulate when I feel one coming on again, because they haven't gone away. And it's just something that I've learned to recognize and regulate, right, through breathing and, the right circumstances. If I'm in a, high visual environment, I'll just turn and stare at a white wall and, breathe. It takes stimulus out of the equation. I've taken up transcendental meditation. Some people do yoga. It's not my thing yet. But yeah, I think that it's just more of like, rather than just going to our doctors and accepting that they're telling us to take these prescription medicines, to just kind of take a step back and obviously I'm not a medical professional, so I don't claim to be. I think you should always consult your healthcare practitioner, but always an educated one, right? Like someone who knows about hormones if you're a woman in your late 30s and beyond.
Absolutely. And I think it is wise to push back a little bit on whatever the problem is, there's a pill to fix it, because oftentimes they don't talk to you about what the side effects are. of anything. They don't talk to you about what the side effects are of Prozac, Paxil, Celexa, Wellbutrin. I was at one point, first of all, I'm a psychiatric person. I'm a psychiatric social worker who's transitioned over to coaching. So my whole background is in mental health. And I am not a fan of antidepressants at this point in my life, really, having seen what they often do to people. They help some people. We don't really understand how they work, really. It's often like, well, this pill didn't work for that, so we'll try it for depression. Or some people who took this pill for heart condition reported a better mood. So now this is not really an effective heart medication. Now this is an antidepressant. And
and some of the side effects are, feelings of suicide. So it's like, oh, this is like basically making more harm than good sometimes. And, it takes a while to stabilize.
Yeah. You're much better off like diet, exercise, going out in the sun as much as you possibly can, trying to maintain some kind of level of being social, not isolating like so many people do in midlife, and they're just in their groove, they're in their partnership, or they're not in their partnership and they don't think it's possible for them, or they don't want it. And then people stay home and watch Grey's Anatomy on repeat. And that's everything, right?
Yeah.
Pushing yourself, trying new things, launching a business. Like, you're so much better off keeping yourself actively engaged in the world in whatever way.
Yeah. I remember I was watching a movie and Harrison Ford was in it. Oh, no, sorry, The Shrinking Show. And I read, I looked up how old he was, and he's in his 80s. And he said a comment that he still acts because he needs that human connection with people. And that's something that he's realized that he needs. And so he continues to surround himself with people that way.
Yeah, that's amazing and really cool.
Yeah.
So tell me about the origin of your business and what it's about and who it's for and how people can get into it and find it and benefit from it.
Yeah. So the origin is just, I tried so many different products and services, and then I call it girlfriend medicine, where I've got this like big community of women. We're all in the same ages and we compare notes constantly of like, have you tried this or tried this? I have products and for let's say the top 10, but right now I only have 5 categories on the site. I'm sort of starting to roll out, and I want to make sure that I have a lot of vetted products that are mostly, or if not completely, female founded and female owned and operated, as that's just a really core belief for me, is to support women through this process. And so we have products right now for hot flashes and night sweats, insomnia, vaginal dryness, and decreased libido. And then we'll roll out other categories as time goes on for, brain fog, mood changes, irregular periods. And then in the menopause, after your 12 months of not having a cycle, then every day after that is considered, I guess, post-menopause, right? So we'll add on urinary incontinence, bone density loss, and heart health concern products and services as well. So just kind of going through what are the top symptoms and what are the items that we can help to support women during this time. And then the same thing, I've got a few fun bundles where I've bundled categories based on a need, like, spice things up, or welcome to the club, or, skin and glow. So just different products that are grouped that way. And then I would say the category that we're deepest in is the hot flashes and night sweats. I think sleep is a big concern for many people. So I like to tell people, if you have a bad night's sleep, it affects everything, right? You wake up and you're groggy, so you've got like brain fog, concentration issues. You are tired, so you make bad food decisions. You skip the gym because you're exhausted. You're kind of irritable and grumpy and maybe hangry. And then, when it comes time to get in the mood, you're not in the mood because you're exhausted. So just kind of going back to having like a good night's sleep. So our products for that are cooling sheets, cooling blankets, temperature regulating pillowcases, sleepwear, nighties, fans. So just a huge collection of, what can you surround yourself on your body and in your home to help support yourself through your symptoms.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm going to look at that sleep stuff because I'm saying this for comedic effect, but it is true. My sleep routine has become like, I look like I'm going to perform an elaborate S&M ritual, like, by my sleep mask.
Yeah.
Like I have to sleep in a certain position, and my partner, I'm like, don't touch me. I'm like,
We're the same. Yeah. I have I have the AC set for 60, like kicks on around like 10 p.m. I've got the same thing, earplugs because he snores. I've got my eye mask for the light. I've got all of it. Like I'm going like, undercover basically. Yeah. But it's important, right? Because it literally affects everything. And then I've gone so far to start taking magnesium at night. I think that's been really helpful. And then, it's kind of funny for someone who has spent the last 10 years telling everyone to drink alcohol. Now I'm kind of like taking a little step back and being like, well, maybe not late at night, like cut back on your night drinking so that you don't wake up at 2 a.m. with your liver processing, or maybe just become a day drinker. And then same thing for caffeine. I was a big caffeine junkie and just kind of cut that out. And I have such great sleep now because of that kind of like that nervousness and that anxiety that I was feeling. I thought, well, let me just see if caffeine's a trigger. And it's been really effective in terms of, just finding that even energy and balance, because I was drinking 2 cups in the morning and it was doing nothing. So I thought, like, why am I doing this if it doesn't help? So I kind of weaned myself off. And the first day I knew I was going to get a headache. So I took a couple Advil. And then the second day I only took 1 because I was like, okay, maybe it's less. And then the third day, nothing. So no headaches, totally fine. And then I went so far as whitening my teeth the next day so that I could really lock it in. Like, okay, now you can't do it. And so it's been great. It's been about a couple of years now without caffeine. And I wake up at 5 a.m. ready to go, full of energy.
Yeah. Have you noticed that? I notice a lot of women, including myself, their body clock has just naturally shifted. And you understand why elderly people eat dinner.
Yeah, and then they sleep 5 hours or 6 hours and that they're fine, right?
Yeah, or why, my parents started to eat dinner earlier and earlier and earlier as they aged because they were going to bed at like 8 o'clock, 8:30.
Yeah.
I used to be a nightlife person, a nightlife performer. And now I'm like, oh, it's 8:30. I'm winding down to bed in like a half an hour. I go to bed at 9 and I wake up around 5:15.
Yeah, I think it's also like where our energy cycles are, right? So same when I was in my 20s living in New York, I was a night owl. I'd go out partying, I'd stay out till 2 or 4 in the morning, and then somehow just muscle through the day, right? But then now, I'm older. I live in a town where there's not a bunch going on at night, and I've got kids that go to bed early. So for the most part, I find just kind of my core of the day has shifted naturally to be earlier.
Walk me through your morning routine.
Oh gosh. So I read a book called The 5 a.m. Club, and it was fantastic. It's just, talked a lot about owning your morning and owning your life. and so I've become someone who just now naturally almost I find myself waking up a little bit before the alarm. I go to the gym for an early morning weight resistance class 2 times a week. I was never really I was more in my, again, 20s and 30s, a cardio person. And that's just what you thought you had to do. And then just kind of switched in midlife, knowing that you have to have some more resistance training for your bones and your muscle health. And so I do that. And then I come home, shower, and then start getting ready for the kids. I've got 3 kids, so they need their breakfasts made, their lunches packed. Spend, as much kind of quality time with them as I can, not making it kind of rush and go. So I try to do a couple things beforehand the night before to kind of optimize for the day, and then get them to school. And then I've got this awesome planner. It's called the Productivity Planner that I use. And it's great because it kind of maps out your day, your most important tasks, your habit trackers. So I really like using that as well. And then, off to the races to work on my business for the few hours that I have while the kids are away.
That's amazing. How long has your business been operational? How long has your website been live?
So we're fairly new. We launched in November of 2024, so only a few months. It's been going really well. So I've been excited to see, how successful it's been in such a short amount of time. And I've been really surprised by some of the product categories that are shining. Low libido is our top category. And I would have thought it would have been hot flashes for sure. So we've got quite a few tools and resources and tips in that area as well.
So you're partnering with other brands, I guess.
Correct. Yeah, I don't manufacture anything.
I was looking at the low libido stuff because, of course, that's what everyone wants to talk about.
Yeah.
Talk to me about those products and which ones are the ones that most women, if women are scared, right? Because everyone is so ashamed talking about sex. I think still, even at this age, And I think it's because there's so much anxiety around losing or thinking that you're going to lose your sexuality or your sensuality when you hit menopause. I think that's one of the biggest myths.
Yeah.
One of the myths I'm trying to dispel both in myself and also in the women I work with is I really think that perimenopause is a second sexual awakening for a lot of women, or it can be if you don't shut yourself down.
Yeah.
And you can work through the messages that we get that once a woman is out of her reproductive years, that she's somehow not sexual anymore, or there's something like gross. I think actually we get the message that like an older woman having sex is somehow distasteful. Or
Yeah. No, I think, I'm with you. I think that it's obviously like a time of reinvention for sure of, who am I in this stage of my life? It's like transitional moments. And I think when you were talking, I was thinking of Samantha from Sex and the City, just celebrated, right? Like she was a vibrant, sexual character and, was unabashedly, proud of her sexuality. So I think that's something that we can reclaim. I think going back to like energy and fatigue is a big one. And so I think libido kind of kicks in because we're so tired. We have all these responsibilities in the sandwich generation of taking care of our children and our elderly and aging parents. And then also just, our careers as well. So just everything that we're kind of handling on top and we kind of put ourselves last. So when it comes to pleasuring ourselves or enjoying sex or seeking sex, it's almost like that's like the last thing on the list. And so we have to kind of move that up to the top of the list. And, with that, like feel vibrant, feel sexy, feel rested. And then I think exercise is such a big component of that. Like when we feel good in our bodies, we kind of project that sexuality out into the world as well. And then, on our site, we have quite a few. We've got tips in terms of staying hydrated, doing pelvic floor exercises. There's also a tool called the LV that it has like an app attached to it. We don't have that on our site yet, but I hope that we will soon in terms of lubricants and moisturizers, which we have on the site as well. The collection of vibrators, different strokes for different folks, right? So, what is the kind of vibrator that you like? So we have a variety there. And then this is something I've been kind of tuned on to lately that I love. So I'm not like a visual porn person. That's never been my thing. I think it's really hard on women in society to have these like ideas that like, oh, we have to look that way, or, my body doesn't look that way, or my body doesn't do that. So I've really gotten into audio erotica, and there are a couple apps that I've discovered and I have referenced on our site as well. But one is called Dipsea, Dipsea, and the other is called Quinn. And what I love about these is that you get to use your own imagination, right? Like it's a fantasy that you have in your head. You could listen to it with a partner, and it helps really kind of get you in the mood. Like you might be like, I'm like, out of like 1 to 10, my like level of wanting sex right now is like a 3. But if we play this, I might be a 7. So just kind of like, just something that takes the edge off and gets you out of your brain, out of your own way sometimes is really beautiful. And then they have a collection of self-pleasuring exercises as well. So it's been, just something that I think is a good unlock for women.
That is really cool. And I think that we're just at the age where we should not be so wrapped up in shame.
Yeah.
And I think Gen X, our generation, is really changing the conversation around menopause. It used to be, you think of Edith Bunker or Mrs. Roper or whoever, Mrs. Garrett from the Facts, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Golden Girls were supposed to be in their 50s, which is great.
I know.
The ladies, no offense, but to the Golden Girls, but they, they were frowsy. They were frumpy.
Yeah.
I don't know I know 0 women between 45 and 60 who I would say are frumpy women. None.
Yeah. Same. I think it's, a different change in society for sure. And like to your point, this is like perimenopause and menopause are in our zeitgeist now, right? Like we can talk about it. Whereas growing up, I never knew when my mom was in perimenopause or menopause. Like I remember her having hot flashes and cranking the AC there for a while, but I never really understood why or what was happening. And she didn't really vocalize it. And, I'm very different where I'm extremely vocal about what's happening, not only to my children, but also my husband, and he's going through his own version. of, decline in testosterone and how that's impacting him. So we have a shared vocabulary and understanding of how hormones affect both men and women. And, I think that's why there's like a high divorce rate around this time in life, because, people are just kind of dealing with all of these in a silo instead of talking with them, with their partner, and communicating about what's happening. And for women too, like, you hear about this meno rage or giving zero fucks, or like just sort of like all like none of the fucks left to give, or, all of these things, because you're just kind of like these like fed up moments, or like, being a Karen, right? And it's just like, versus just like realizing like, hey, we've been through a lot. Our bodies are changing. We're having, moments of hormone imbalance, and let's just call it what it is. We're in perimenopause, and that there's ways that we can work around it.
How did you talk to your husband about it? Tell me more, because maybe it'll help other women. Because I think, I know for myself, I mean, I had to have a hysterectomy, and my partner drove me back and forth to the surgery. And so obviously he knows. But if I could have held it from him, I would have. I think for me, having a hysterectomy is where the floodgate had to open, and I had to stop being in denial, and I had to actually start. That was the impetus of me really having honest conversations around aging and starting my company, was because there was no pretending anymore. There was no tee-hee-hee, forever young, I can pretend I'm always going to be a girl. And I was just not able to play that card anymore. So my conversation had to happen. How did you open the conversation with your husband? Because I think a lot of women still struggle with just the shame around having to admit they're no longer, they're afraid their husband is going to see them differently, I think.
Yeah, I'm fortunate. My husband, I consider him very empathetic. He, grew up with a single mom in a community of single moms. So I think he has a different acceptance of women, and, has always like cared for his mom. He's like very, very dedicated. And we have 2 daughters. So I think that's also opened his eyes too about like, compassion and sympathy from a girl perspective. And he's also someone who he's a little bit of like a biohacker, right? Like a tinkerer, if you will, with his own body, and cares a lot about longevity, especially as his parents are aging. He sees them getting frail, and he doesn't want that, right? So he wants to live a long and healthy life. And so he's definitely, turned me on to things like Function Health, which is like a lab test for all of your blood work that you can just kind of take into your own hands, versus having to ask your doctor and beg like, hey, can you please do a full blood panel on me? But so, yeah, he's definitely aware of, hormones and cycles as well. So, talking to other friends in that community, he learned a lot about like testosterone decline and how that impacts men. And, what some of the shared experiences that men and women have through menopause and andropause are mood swings, depression, headaches, night sweats, insomnia, weight gain, and bone loss. And then men have their own version of, their hair loss, their menopause middle, andropause middle, or their weight gain in the belly. There could be some mild to moderate erectile dysfunction during this time, low energy, lack of focus. So some people would call this like a midlife crisis, but I think that's just diminishing what it really is, right? It's just a decline in our hormones, and it's really important to talk about it as a couple. So for me, we talk a lot of like I statements, and Gabe, like my husband, he's seen me through, IVF hormonal journey, through, trying out different, medicines there to get pregnant, the postpartum depression that I went through afterwards. And, just a mirror to me, right? When I said, like, I didn't even remember that I was that far gone when I was in postpartum. And so, just kind of the recognition of like, hey, let me know when I'm that far deep again, because sometimes we don't recognize it. And then just like, I think in the past, he would have probably dismissed things like, oh, it's just your time of the month. And it's like, okay, now we don't use that phrase anymore. Now it's like, hey, like I'm out of balance, or I'm out of sync, or I'm unregulated. And so just, not poking fun at things, right? And keeping track of my cycle so that I know personally, like, hey, I'm a little bit more emotional, or I'm a little bit more heightened this time. And it's, because I'm going to get my period in 4 days, right? So just being really aware of that. And then, just saying like, hey, I'm feeling like not in the mood right now. And, it's not has anything to do with you. It's just, I think it's just hormonal. And, maybe we can find some other ways to to get around it. We're big fans of something called the Gottman Institute, which is, I guess learning, therapy. It's like all of the above. Husband and wife team. And we used it when we were having some problems in our marriage. And it was just amazing, all of the tools and learnings that we gained from it. But one of them is fun. It's just an app on our phone. And it's called Love Decks. And, it's got like date night questions, or it has like this one called the salsa cards. And is it mild, medium, and spicy questions to ask each other? But also just about getting curious with each other. Like, hey, what's it like for you right now as you're feeling this? Because we are mirrors to each other. And if we feel something, we can only like assume that our partner, sees it too, but they don't, right? Like we have to communicate.
Yeah, I think that's so wise, because a lot of people, a lot of marriages, a lot of relationships suffer during this time because everyone feels so worried about what they feel they're losing and not focused on what they're gaining instead. It's no longer your time of the month, it's your time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exclamation point. That's it. Yeah.
I feel like because men are so achievement driven, and women have become more achievement driven, but traditionally men are more like, if they don't have X number of money in the bank, X amount of money in the bank, they haven't hit certain milestones in their career. When they hit like 45, 50, and they're supposed to be in that executive suite, and if they're not, or, manager or whatever it is in their particular field, it can be a reckoning for them too. And I think women, because our reckoning is much more obvious, something that happened every 28 to 33 days.
Yeah.
or is happening like in weird, patterns or patterns they can't understand. Our reckoning is much more obvious, and their reckoning is a little more subtle.
And it's the first time that they're feeling it, right? Like we've been feeling it once a month since we were teenagers. And this is sort of like all in one shot, and kind of up and down, up and down. So the impact is greater because they don't recognize like, oh, it's hormones, or like we can't say like, oh, it's because we haven't seen it in their pattern before. So I think that's why it just hits so strongly.
Yeah. When you're feeling the blahs, the midlife blahs, like what do you do for self-care?
So I've taken up a practice called transcendental meditation, and I've never been someone to meditate. Like I always thought, I don't know if this was like the old New Yorker in me. My mind was always going, always racing, like just always moving, and prided myself on that go, go, go. And then I guess maybe now living in California, I've become a little bit more open to more of the woo-woo things that I used to think were like, not for me, but now I've really embraced them. And meditation was one that I always thought like, oh, I'm doing it wrong, or, I keep thinking about all this other stuff. And then someone recommended to me TM. Mm-hmm. And what I love about it is that there's no wrong way, right? Like you can just be accepting of the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions that come in, and notice them and kind of let them go. And at the end, you can kind of say like, was this an easy meditation or a hard one? Like there's an app on my phone that, it's 20 minutes and I have 3-minute come out. And it's the days that I do it are just completely amazing compared to the days where I don't, or think I don't have time. So it's like very much like, how do I commit to doing this maybe once or even twice a day? Because having that moment of self-care, of quiet mind, of self-awareness, it really just, that's been a big one. I think, just breathing practices when I feel myself getting a little fired up, just like slow down and box breathing. And my kids laugh at me because they see if I'm just like taking deep breaths, they're like, oh, time to give mom a little break here before she like explodes. So I've also just, learned to say language like, hey, I'm really upset right now. Mom needs a break, or, there's like that kind of wording just to recognize the feelings and call them out is another big one that I've learned.
Perfect. And what is the thing about yourself? What about yourself have you discovered in midlife that's been surprising?
Oh, wow. I think that I still have imposter syndrome. I would have thought I'd be over it by now. Like, just something that like, for someone that's kind of reinvented myself a couple of times. And the first time was so hard because so much of my identity was tied into what I did for a living and, the salary and this community that I had around that career. And so it took like a couple of years to kind of like make the leap. And then this time around, it was a lot shorter, maybe like a few months, but, still had that annoying inner critic in my head saying, well, you're not a doctor. Who are you to start a business around perimenopause? And it's like, well, I guess if I could just say I'm not and then just kind of keep going with it. Right. So yeah, I think it was surprising that was still showing up.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that too, because you're really highly successful. I mean, I looked at all the things that you sent me and I was blown away. But I understand that. I've been a therapist for 25 years and, I don't think I'm a dumb person, but I struggle with putting myself out there too. Like, who am I to step forward? Who am I to speak with authority?
Yeah. And I think, this is hopefully changing with, this next generation that we're like giving our young women and girls a bigger voice, right? That it's like, oh, you can do that, like, versus we're being told like, oh no, you can't do that. So hopefully that's going to change in a couple of years.
Imagine what your daughters will do. It's kind of really to think about.
Yeah. It's the sky's the limit, right? Like a whole world of possibility.
Yeah. So I'm going to drop all your links in the show notes, but tell everybody where they can find you, because I'm going to have it in the show notes, but they want to hear it from you too.
For sure. Yeah. So Hot or Just Me is the website. Again, go to the show notes so you can get the discount code. If you put Magical Midlife in the promo code, you get 10% off of your order. And on all social media can be found at Hot or Just Me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Kate. It was awesome to talk with you.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening to Your Magical Midlife. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. You can follow me on Instagram at Your Magical Midlife, and you can check out my offerings on my website, yourmagicalmidlife.com. I offer individual and small group coaching, as well as luxury retreats for women in midlife and beyond who are seekers, dreamers, and unconventional thinkers. You can book a complimentary discovery call in the calendar link in my show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or share this episode with a friend. And I will talk to you next week.